I want you to think about the last time you actually looked at a road sign while driving somewhere familiar. Not glanced at it, actually read it, actually checked it against what you expected to see. Most of us don't. We follow the blue line on a screen, we listen to the voice telling us to turn left in 400 feet, and we trust it so completely that we have, in a very real sense, stopped actually navigating at all. The app navigates, we simply follow. I want to tell you about the 6 weeks I spent slowly realizing that following was not always safe. My name doesn't matter for this story. What matters is that I am a 32-year-old woman living in a suburb outside Richmond, Virginia, and I drive a decent amount for my job in medical equipment sales, regional routes, client visits, the kind of driving where you rely on GPS navigation almost entirely because you are covering unfamiliar territory constantly and simply do not have the mental bandwidth to memorize every route. This is the story of what happened when my GPS started sending me somewhere it should not have. The first time it happened, I genuinely did not think anything of it. I was driving to a client visit about 40 minutes outside my usual territory, a route I had never taken before, relying entirely on my phone's GPS app the way I always did for unfamiliar drives. About halfway through the trip, the app announced a reroute, faster route available, and redirected me off the state highway I'd been on onto a smaller county road I did not recognize. I followed it. That is what you do. That is the entire premise of using a navigation app in the first place. You trust that the software has more complete information about traffic and road conditions than you do, and you follow its instructions without much scrutiny. The road it sent me down was narrower than the highway, lined with trees, sparsely populated with the occasional farmhouse set back from the road. It eventually rejoined the state highway a few miles later, and I arrived at my client visit only a couple of minutes earlier than my original route would have gotten me there. Not a dramatic time savings, not something that struck me as unusual enough to remember, if I'm honest, beyond the mild, forgettable observation that the reroute hadn't really been worth it. I did not think about that road again for almost 2 weeks. The second time, I noticed it immediately, because it was a completely different trip to a completely different destination on a completely different day. I was driving to a different client in a different part of the region, a trip that should have taken me nowhere near that same narrow county road. About 20 minutes in, the app rerouted me again, same phrasing, faster route available, and sent me down what I recognized with a small, uncomfortable jolt as the exact same stretch of road. Same trees, same sparse farmhouses, same old half-collapsed barn about halfway down that I remembered distantly from the first time. I remember sitting at a stop sign part-way down that road, engine idling, staring at the map on my phone screen, trying to make sense of how 2 entirely unrelated trips, starting from different points and heading to different destinations, could both plausibly be rerouted through the exact same rural stretch. It was not impossible. Roads intersect. Regional routing algorithms sometimes funnel traffic through the same efficient corridors, regardless of specific origin or destination. I told myself that. I told myself it was simply how the underlying map data happened to be structured for that part of the county. I did not fully believe myself, but I did not yet have a better explanation either.
The third time was the one that made me stop accepting coincidence as an answer.
It happened on a trip where I had deliberately, consciously decided not to follow any reroute the app suggested, specifically because some part of me, after the second incident, had started paying closer attention. When the familiar "faster route available" notification appeared, pointing me once again toward that same rural turnoff, I ignored it and continued on my original route instead. The app did not simply drop the suggestion the way apps usually do when you decline a reroute. It re-suggested the same turn 3 more times over the following 2 miles, with an insistence that felt, in retrospect, distinctly unlike the ordinary behavior of a navigation algorithm quietly accepting a driver's choice and moving on. That night, at home, I did what I probably should have done after the second incident. I looked at my full trip history in the app, going back several months, searching specifically for any other trips that had been rerouted through that same rural county road. I found 4 more, 4 separate trips across 3 months to 4 different unrelated destinations, all of them rerouted at some point along the way through that exact same abandoned stretch of county road. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time that night, looking at those 4 overlapping route lines on my screen, all converging onto the same narrow stretch of road despite having nothing else in common. I did what anyone reasonably concerned at that point would do. I searched online for information about GPS rerouting anomalies, and what I found did not make me feel better. There is a real, documented phenomenon called GPS spoofing, a technique where someone broadcasts a false GPS signal strong enough to override the actual satellite signal your phone or car receives, effectively tricking your device into believing it is somewhere it is not, or that certain routes are faster or slower than they actually are. It is used in various documented cases for purposes ranging from testing autonomous vehicle systems to, in some considerably more concerning instances, deliberately manipulating traffic patterns in a specific area for reasons that were never fully made public in the reporting I found. I also found something more specific. A regional news article, almost a year old, about a string of vehicle break-ins and at least 2 reported carjackings that had occurred along rural roads in counties surrounding mine, with several victims describing the same strange detail I had personally experienced. Their GPS navigation had rerouted them, unexpectedly, onto an isolated rural road shortly before the incident occurred. I filed a report the next morning, printing out my trip history with the 4 overlapping routes clearly marked, along with the news article I had found about the string of incidents in neighboring counties. The officer who took my report, a detective named Osei, who I was told specialized in cases involving technology-facilitated crime, took the report considerably more seriously than I had braced myself for. He explained that GPS spoofing devices, while not something local police departments encountered often, had become increasingly accessible and inexpensive over recent years, and that his department had, in fact, been quietly aware of a possible connection between spoofed rerouting and the earlier string of rural break-ins and carjackings, though nothing had ever been definitively proven. The working theory, he told me, is that someone is using a portable spoofing device, likely mounted somewhere along that corridor, broadcasting a signal strong enough to trigger reroutes in a specific radius, funneling unfamiliar drivers onto an isolated road where there's minimal traffic, minimal visibility from other vehicles, and no real reason for anyone to be driving through unless their GPS told them to. He asked whether on any of my trips through that road I had noticed any other vehicles, any parked cars, anything unusual along the route itself. I thought about it carefully. On my second trip, the one where I first recognized the road, I remembered a dark van parked on the shoulder near the old collapsed barn, engine running, no one visibly inside that I had noticed at the time. I had not thought about that van again until Detective Osei asked the question directly. Detective Osei's department, working with a regional task force that had apparently been quietly investigating the earlier break-ins for several months, deployed a technical team to sweep that stretch of road with signal detection equipment capable of identifying unauthorized GPS spoofing transmissions. They found it within the first day, a small, weatherproofed transmission device concealed inside a hollowed-out fence post near the old barn, powered by a solar panel disguised as agricultural equipment, broadcasting a spoofed GPS signal strong enough to trigger rerouting for any vehicle passing within roughly a 2-mile radius. The device had, according to the forensic analysis conducted afterward, been active for at least 5 months, meaning every reroute I had personally experienced, and likely dozens of reroutes experienced by other unsuspecting drivers throughout that period, had been deliberately manufactured, not by any legitimate traffic algorithm, but by someone who had built and installed a piece of hardware specifically designed to funnel strangers onto an isolated road. The task force's working theory, based on the pattern of prior break-ins and the 2 reported carjackings in the surrounding counties, was that the device had been used to identify and isolate vehicles, separating unfamiliar, likely distracted drivers from normal traffic patterns, placing them alone on a low-visibility road where a vehicle could be more easily targeted, whether for theft, robbery, or worse, with minimal risk of witnesses. No one was ever definitively arrested in direct connection to the device itself, though the broader investigation into the string of rural incidents remained active, and the removal of the device coincided, notably, with a sharp and sustained drop in reported incidents along that same corridor over the following months. I do not blindly follow reroute suggestions anymore. I want to be honest that this has made my drives, in a small practical sense, slightly less convenient. I now cross-reference unexpected reroutes against my own general sense of the area, and I decline any suggested route that takes me somewhere I don't recognize without a clear, sensible reason for the detour. What stays with me most from this entire experience is how completely I had outsourced my own awareness of where I was going to a piece of software I had never once questioned. I did not know the names of the roads I drove almost every week. I knew only the blue line on a screen and the calm, confident voice telling me where to turn next. If you rely on GPS navigation regularly, and at this point nearly everyone does, I want you to take one specific thing from what happened to me. Pay attention when a reroute takes you somewhere unfamiliar, especially onto smaller, less traveled roads, especially at times when you are driving alone. If a suggested detour does not make intuitive sense given your general knowledge of the area, consider declining it, or at minimum, staying alert in a way you might not otherwise think to. Most reroutes are exactly what they claim to be, legitimate adjustments for traffic, construction, or road conditions. I want to be clear about that. The overwhelming majority of the Blue Line's suggestions deserve the trust we give them without thinking. But the technology that makes GPS navigation so convenient is also, as I learned, capable of being quietly, deliberately manipulated by someone with the right equipment and the wrong intentions. Trust the map, but not blindly. And if you ever notice the same unfamiliar road appearing more than once across trips that have no reasonable connection to each other, stop trusting the coincidence and start asking why.